You can pay off your house 2.5 years faster if you don't pay extra principal payments. In this episode, I'm going to address the question, how long does it take to pay the mortgage off on a house, to pay off a house? Now, the answer's fairly simple, but I'm going to share some things with you that most people don't understand. They don't do the math. You'll be shocked. You can get out of debt 2.5 years faster by not sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company. So, my name's Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist for more than 46 years. And I've written 11 books, and many of my books address this concept. In fact, in my very first book, which I self-published, it was called Missed Fortune. And then I was going through like 5,000 copies a month, and it got the attention of Time Warner, Warner Business Books, and they purchased the right to that book and commissioned me to write several more. Well, we were blessed in 2007 to actually have my third book become a New York Times and Wall Street Journal #1 bestseller. And in all of these books, especially the very first one, the first chapter was titled The $25,000 Mistake, being made by millions of Americans. Well, that was back in the year 2000. Now with inflation, cost of living, it's not a $25,000 mistake, it's a $100,000 mistake that is being made by many, many Americans who send extra principal payments to the mortgage company. So I'm going to share with you some insights in how you can pay off your house much quicker, but let's start with the milk and then we'll end up with the meat. So when people ask how long does it take to pay off a house, the simple answer is, well, that depends on the rate, your interest rate on the mortgage, and the term of the mortgage. If you have a 30-year amortized mortgage, which is the most common time period, that means it's going to take 30 years to pay off the mortgage if you make just the regular monthly principal and interest payments, because it's amortized over 30 years. And that means that as you go through the early years, you're paying a lot of interest and very little principal reduction. On a 30-year mortgage, halfway through, in the 15th year, if all you've been making is regular mortgage payments, halfway through you'll still owe between 67% to maybe 76% of the original balance. So if you borrowed $300,000, you're still going to owe probably close to, $200,000 or $225,000, even though you've gone through half of the mortgage term. If you are taking over a mortgage or assuming a mortgage, which those are few and far between these days, it would be the remaining period on that amortized mortgage. Now, some people take out a 15-year amortized mortgage because that forces them to make a higher payment. But if they can afford it, they get the house paid off in 15 years. So the simple answer is, well, what's the term of the mortgage, and are you planning on just making regular principal and interest payments? If it's a 15-year mortgage, the answer is 15 years. If it's a 30-year amortized mortgage, it's 30 years. Now, there's a lot of other kinds of mortgages where people maybe have interest only for the first 5 years or 7 years, and then it adjusts and amortizes the rest of the time period for a 30-year period total. Or maybe you refinance. Many people refinance on the average every 6 or 7 years. And if you continually take out a new 30-year mortgage, it will take 30 years from when you took out that mortgage if you just make the regular principal and interest payments. So what do most people think is the best way to pay off their house? To send extra principal payments to the mortgage company, to take out a 15-year mortgage instead of a 30-year mortgage. Well, if that's what you're going to do, yeah, you will pay off your house maybe sooner. Many times people are convinced to do what is called a bi-weekly mortgage plan, because a lot of people are paid bi-weekly. They get paid every 2 weeks, and so that's 26 pay periods a year. Now there's 12 months, so you're not being paid semi-monthly, you're being paid bi-weekly in that case. And so they say, hey, you know what? Just pay half of the mortgage payment every paycheck. And you magically make an extra mortgage payment every year if you do that, because there's 26 pay periods. Half of 26 is 13. And oh, you'll pay off your house 10 years earlier or after 20 years or 21 years. There's nothing magic about that. But I'm going to share with you why any form of sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company is not the fastest and quickest way to pay off your mortgage. So it seems logical. Well, why don't you save yourself interest by sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company? Well, if you understand how money really works, when you send that money to the mortgage company, in my opinion, it's like saying, here, Mr. Mortgage Banker, here's an extra $100 this month. Now, don't pay me any interest on that. In fact, if I want it back, I'll borrow it back on your terms and prove there's a need why I should have it. Now, that sounds sort of stupid when I say it that way, but see, when you give it to the mortgage company, if you get into trouble, if you get unemployed, if you get set back with maybe a disability or a pandemic or whatever, you go to the mortgage company and you say, hey, I've been sending you an extra $100 a month or $200 or $500 a month for several years now. I calculate I'm this far ahead. The payment was only this. I've been sending you this. So I calculate I'm about a year and a half ahead. So I'm just going to coast while I'm convalescing here in the hospital or in the rehab center because I've been paying you extra. No. Your next mortgage payment is due. When you send extra principal payments to the mortgage, that doesn't buy you time that you can skip a payment. Your next payment is due in 30 days. I don't care if you had a lump sum, a windfall of $50,000 or $100,000 on a $300,000 mortgage, and you walk in and you pay $100,000 against that $300,000 mortgage. The next month, your normal mortgage payment is still due. And so if you get in trouble, the only way to get that $100,000 back is to borrow it back on their terms and prove there's a need why you should have it. So I want to share a story with you that I had with 3 finance professors, and they were flabbergasted when I showed them mathematically. They were telling their 400 students in accounting the wrong advice. So before I tell this story, if you have questions, be sure and make comments and ask them below. I would suggest you subscribe to this channel. You're going to get some epiphanies here, and I have several stories just like this. So one day, years ago, I met with 3 finance professors at a major university, and they said, Mr. Andrew, we teach all of our 400 students here in the accounting department why when they buy their first house, they should consider taking out a 15-year amortized mortgage instead of a 30-year amortized mortgage if they can afford the higher payments. And I said, really? Why do you do that? And they looked at me in shock like, well, duh. Maybe they meant Doug, I don't know. But they said, if you just bite the bullet and you pay a higher payment, you'll save yourself a whole bunch of interest and you'll have your house paid off in 15 years. Then you can take that money you were paying in house payments and put it into like a tax-deferred IRA or 401k. You might end up with this much money at the end of the day. I said, gentlemen, you're finance professors. Haven't you ever taken the differential between a 15-year amortized mortgage payment, let's say of this, that I used an actual mortgage example amount, versus a 30-year amortized mortgage payment of this? Take the difference and the tax savings you will achieve during the first 15 years of a 30-year mortgage, and don't spend it. Put it over here, and I was pointing to my right-hand pocket. See your mortgage balance over here. These are your liabilities. This is your assets. Put it over here, compounding tax-free. And they went, what's tax-free? So I had to educate them about my favorite vehicle called the Laser Fund. And you can get a free copy of my book, The Laser Fund, to understand what I'm talking about here by going to laserfund.com. But let me share with you what they said. Well, no, we've never done that math. And so I pulled out an HP 12C calculator and I did it right in front of these 3 finance professors, and they were flabbergasted. By putting the extra principal payments, they were telling their students in a 15-year amortized mortgage, putting that plus the tax savings over here, compounding tax-free at historical rates of return of 8%, because I said, hey, do you know the mortgage you're talking about at the time was 6%? 6% after the tax breaks you get on deducting a mortgage is only 4%. So here you are, you're paying 4% interest net, and you're making 8% interest, double that over here. That's 100% more. That's what banks do. They borrow our money and put it out there and loan it back again, and they make double what they're paying you in interest at the bank, sometimes more than double. I said, do the math. They were flabbergasted. Do you know there was enough money over here in the right-hand pocket to totally pay off the 30-year mortgage in 12 and a half years? Using the same money, they were telling their students to give it to the mortgage company in a 15-year mortgage and have the house paid off in 15 years. And then if you want, you pay off the house in one fell swoop in 12 and a half years, and then you start socking away the difference, and there was an extra $250,000 at the end of the day. Now, back then, it was $25,000 of Uncle Sam's money you were using to get out of debt instead of your own money, instead of killing your partner, Uncle Sam, with the tax deduction. Now, that was on a $150,000 mortgage example. If you're sitting here right now and you have a $300,000 mortgage, that's a $50,000 mistake. But many Americans now have $600,000 mortgages. That's a $100,000 mistake. You're kissing $100,000 down the drain. Other than that, I don't have any strong feelings on this subject, but math doesn't lie. You can get out of debt faster by not sending the money to the mortgage company, but putting it over here. But it's liquid and safe. If you have an emergency, you can get it back anytime. You give it to the mortgage company, you can't get it back unless you prove you can qualify. And when you need it the worst, it's the hardest to get. So if this is intriguing you and you would like to learn more, you can Google any of my books and go to Amazon, search for Missed Fortune 101. But my most recent best-selling book that's flying off the shelves is called The Laser Fund. It's my 11th book. The unique thing about this book is on this side, because it's actually two books in one, we have 14 chapters with all kinds of charts and graphs and explanations, and I'm addressing this topic in one of those sections. But if you learn more right brain by stories, you flip the book over, and this is comprised of about 100 pages, 12 chapters with actual 62 client stories that illustrate this. And there's a chapter dedicated to real estate equity management. And in there, you'll learn about people who have paid off their house the quickest, smartest way by not sending extra principal payments to the mortgage company. So I'll tell you what, I'll pay for the book. I'll buy the book. You go to laserfund.com, L-A-S-E-R, fund, F-U-N-D.com. And you contribute $5.95 towards the shipping and handling, and then I'll pay for the book and cover the rest and send it out to you, and you can begin to learn about concepts and strategies like this that will empower you financially.